the August 17th, 2020 meeting of the Philadelphia Police Advisory Commission. My name is Ben Geffen. I will be acting as chair today. Rhonda Goldfein, the chair of the Police Advisory Commission, is unavailable today, so I'm vice chair acting in her place. And I thank everybody for joining this meeting via Zoom. I know some people are still getting onto the screen, but let's just go ahead and start with a roll call. And so I'd like to begin just by recognizing the folks I see from the commission on the screen right now. I see Mujib Chowdhury. Hi, Mujib. I see Michael Wehrman. I see Sarah Young. Are there any other commissioners whose names I missed? Okay, well that's it for now. Hopefully others will join the meeting shortly. And then as for staff, I see Hans. And Hans, do you want to introduce your colleagues?
Absolutely. Thanks, Ben. So I will tell you who I see. Danny is here. Danny is up in our top left corner. Danny is the PAC, what do we call it? The executive assistant to the staff, but also office manager. I see Janine Zajac, who's a policy analyst. I see Anthony Irachi, our deputy executive director. Angelica Hendricks, who is a policy analyst. I don't see anybody else, but I do see BB, who is BB Kivitz is our counsel. I think Ben already mentioned BB. Did I miss anybody?
All right, great. Well, I'm not going to take up a lot of time with the chair's report, but let me just acknowledge let me just acknowledge that this is an especially challenging time for the staff of the PAC for a couple of reasons. Obviously, the pandemic is going on, and obviously police issues for the last 2 or 3 months have been at the forefront of public concern here in Philadelphia and around the whole country, much more so than usual. And I just want to commend the PAC for the tremendous job that the staff has been doing during these twin crises and maintaining its work and doing so at the highest level. So thanks to the staff, thanks to Hans. And with that, I'll turn it over to Hans for the report of the executive director.
I quickly, before you begin, Hans, I just want to also mention, because I forgot to earlier, if anybody has questions, you can raise your hand using the Zoom function, or you can also message me as the host in the chat, and I will field those to Hans. Sorry about that. You can continue, Hans.
Well, thank you, Danny, for keeping us organized today, and thanks, Ben, for filling in for your kind words. Absolutely, the staff of the analysts in particular.
Oop, I think we lost. Is Hans paused for you too, Ben? Oop. I think Hans' internet connection is not great at the moment. Sorry about that, folks.
Hi, yeah, it looks like Hans is frozen and hopefully he will be able to get back on very soon. But in the meantime, let me just make sure everybody else is able to hear what's going on. It looks like other people are logged in. I think this is probably just a problem on Hans's end, but hopefully he'll be getting back on very soon.
Well, he jumped off, so hopefully he's reconnecting. Oh, there he is.
There he is.
Hi, guys.
Hey, Hans.
I'm going to move to a different location to get better service on my computer. Sorry.
While Hans is doing that, let me just make an unsolicited advertisement for the Eero mesh router, which I bought at the beginning of the pandemic at my house. It has been phenomenal. So this message is not brought to you by the Eero mesh router, but let me just share that I have had no Wi-Fi dead spots in even a single square inch of my house ever since getting it. So I can't recommend it enough. Now back to our regularly scheduled programming.
Great. Let me just unmute Hans.
Okay, I'm very sorry about that. I do not have a mesh router. I do pay far too much money to Comcast for that to happen, but thank you for that. So I don't know where you left me, so I'll just start over by thanking Ben and also echoing his sentiments on the staff who have worked really hard on so many different projects. Both Danny and all the analysts have really kept their eye on the ball and have moved a lot of things forward. So complaints are still being received by folks, or if they contact us, and our projects are still moving forward, which I'm really happy about. In fact, many of you, if you read the Inquirer, might have noticed that there was a complaint against the police that was highlighted this weekend. One thing that wasn't necessarily in that article was the fact that Danny accepted that complaint and immediately responded to and communicated with the complainant in a matter of under 48 hours. So what I say often to folks is that we are operating just as well as we were pre-pandemic. The only real difference now is that folks can't walk into our office, and I don't know when that's going to change, but hopefully one day soon. So yeah, as I mentioned, one of the things that's taken up a lot of our time over the last month and over the last year has been the Plainview project. So we've gotten a lot of traction on that over the last month, and Janine's here. She can tell you. Janine is the analyst who's done most of the work on this. I would say by most 99% of the work on this. And has really done an excellent job. We're looking forward to delivering a work product to the police department. Excuse me. Very sorry about that. So we're looking forward to handing over that work product to the police department by the end of this week. The one caveat there is that we decided to break that report up into 3 parts. So part 1 and 2 will be delivered to the police department this month, with part 3, which is going to be focused more on some documents that we are now starting to get this month, so just around 14 months after they were requested, and we'll analyze and offer a report to everybody in the coming months. But as I mentioned, we felt it important to offer what is already a very good and deep analysis based on our currently available information that will be offered to the police department this week, and will be public somewhere between 30 and 45 days after it's delivered. So stay tuned for that. I'll keep my update otherwise somewhat very brief. As I mentioned, that's been the lion's share of our work. There has been other work done recently on a meeting or helping the city of Wilkes-Barre. The city of Wilkes-Barre is themselves hoping to establish a police oversight agency, and felt that the PAC was the version of oversight that they could most easily adapt to their city. So we spent some time with them, with their police chief and with their mayor, talking about what models could work. The PAC has continued meeting with the police department on facial recognition technology. That's one of the emerging techs that we're hoping to see good policy around and good planning around. So we're excited about our role in creating that policy. In addition, and this is in some of the outstanding issues on the agenda, the PAC has continued to follow up with the protest response, which was again a response to the protests in the wake of George Floyd's murder. They were, as everyone knows, some problematic instances that occurred. The PAC wanted to engage in a full review and is still negotiating with the PPD and law department about access to that information. I will I will later on in this meeting talk to you all about the mediation program that we have been working on for the better part of a year. That is hopefully going to start sometime this fall. In addition to everything else, the PAC has, and this will be on our website later on this week, offered recommendations to the police department regarding the classification of the pointing of a firearm as a use of force. So just for context, in other jurisdictions, if a police officer points their firearm at a resident or at a person, it is considered a use of force, and all of the investigation and all of the paperwork that is required when an officer, for instance, might use their axe or punches somebody or does any other kind of use of force is required. Until that is changed, including at this very moment, if a police officer does point their firearm at somebody, there's no way to track that or otherwise document it. And as we noted in the past, and as many jurisdictions seem to agree, the idea that a firearm being pointed at you is not a use of force is difficult for anybody who has ever had a gun pointed at them to agree to. In other words, it's almost certainly considered a traumatic incident and a very serious incident if a firearm is pointed at you. So that recommendation has not yet been formally responded to. However, we are going to release it because it's been over 60 days, and we are anticipating a response from the police department soon. Finally, the PAC has finalized an agreement to collaboratively make or create recommendations and review the PBI process in the police department. Again, the PBI stands for the Police Board of Inquiry. That's basically their administrative hearing. If anything was that, if there's ever an investigation regarding police, the PAC, through Plainview and through a lot of other contacts, has understood that there are challenges, to say the very least, about this process that need to be reviewed and improved. The police department agrees on, at least on some level, that review is necessary, and we've agreed to work on this together. So we look forward to doing more of that. And finally, I'll thank our partners at Power, Live Free, for their continued focus on the concept of improved oversight in the city of Philadelphia and around the country. The Power has continued to host town hall meetings dedicated to this subject every other week. The first meeting I was a panelist on, I've been invited to sit on all of them, and the third meeting was this past week, and again, it was a very fruitful discussion that brings the idea of police oversight to in a really holistic way. So I thank them for continuing to ensure that we're not just talking about this, but that we're really thinking through what police oversight in the city of Philadelphia could look like, and we're doing that by bringing in anyone from a historian to an actual oversight leader to a community leader from different areas of the country to talk about the challenges, the design, the structure, etc. So we're really excited about what the fall can bring for us, and we appreciate the fact that Power and Live Free are leading the city on this conversation. So that's it in terms of an update. Are there any questions for me?
I don't see anything in the chat or any hands currently raised.
Okay.
Great. Thank you for that update, Hans. And as you were talking about the pointed firearm incident, I was just remembering this book that came out a couple years ago by Daniel Ellsberg called The Doomsday Machine, about nuclear weapons. And he took issue with people who said, oh, well, the United States hasn't used a nuclear bomb since Nagasaki. He said, well, actually, every time we deploy a nuclear missile or announce the launching of a new submarine, we're using the bomb. We haven't detonated the bomb, but we're using it to get our way in foreign policy. Obviously, a handgun on a police officer's holster is a little bit different from a thermonuclear warhead, but I think the same logic applies, and I think what you're saying makes a ton of sense for Philadelphia.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that's kind of the underlying critique that officers may use their taser and or their firearm to gain compliance when other tools are a lot more thoughtful and a lot more appropriate. But certainly they'll work to get compliance, but at what cost? And frankly, what mistakes can flow from the fact that a firearm is pointed at somebody, when we understand how quickly that decision is made to pull the trigger. If you eliminate the point half a second or second it takes to pull it out of the holster, we've eliminated time for that officer to reconsider whether or not they do want to discharge. So there's a lot of issues that don't just boil down to psychology and sensitivity, but really just the literal time to think things through. It's an important policy, and we're fairly confident the commissioner is going to adopt it.
That's great. And one other question about that, Hans, I'm just curious. Maybe there's no way to do this research, but has anyone looked at cities with a policy like that versus cities without, and looked at the actual discharge of firearm rates by police officers?
I don't know. We did take a look at some of this research. I'm not sure if Angelica's on right now. She recalls that there was a firearm. There was a difference in discharging, but I'm not entirely sure, to be perfectly honest.
There may be too many variables to be able to do that.
Angelica, do you recall anything? I saw you pop on for a second.
Hey, yes, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yes.
Yeah, so in our report, we actually looked at about 15 other jurisdictions that have this policy. And we included some scholarly literature from other jurisdictions that did evaluations on the new policy. And so we found that having this policy reduced the number of officer-involved shootings without impacting officer safety.
Outstanding. Thank you.
Thanks, Angelica.
So we did have two questions, Hans.
Mm-hmm.
One was really simple question. When are power meetings, and are they open to the public? Which I believe they are public, correct?
So when I escaped my daughter, I left my cell phone upstairs. So I don't exactly remember the power meetings when they are. They're every other week on Thursdays. Gail Lax is from Power and can answer any more questions. I believe there's at least 2 more scheduled though. So if you can unmute Gail, she can probably respond to that much better than I can. Go ahead, Gail.
Hi, everybody. Our town hall meetings are every other Wednesday at 7. The next one is August 26th, and we'll be doing them every other week until the election. So they're on Facebook Live, and they're also on the Power website. I can put it in the chat if you want. But
if you can send me the link, Gail, I'll send it to everybody else in the chat.
Okay.
For sure.
All right. Thanks.
Yeah, everyone.
That's Ben. Ben, you're asking for that?
No, Danny. It says Danny Packer.
Oh, Danny. Okay. Thank you.
I'll be the only one you can chat with anyways.
Okay.
Thanks, Gail. Yeah, like I said, they're great. Everyone should definitely attend. Was there another question, Danny?
Yes. The other question was, what is the update about FOP and the 13 officers trying to get their jobs back?
Yeah, so just for everybody else, there were officers who were implicated in the Plan View project and were either dismissed or, if I recall correctly, resigned in lieu of termination. So during their 30-day suspension, they resigned. They filed a lawsuit against the city seeking, I'm not sure if they were all seeking their job back. Many were, but in seeking back pay and damages. I don't know where that lawsuit stands right now. I am not an attorney, but I've also heard that it is going to be a difficult case for them. So we shall see what occurs with that. Bibi is raising her hand, and Bibi is an attorney. I think she has an opinion on that. Do you want to unmute
just
Bibi?
to add, so
Yeah.
the disciplinary hearings themselves, as I understand, have been moved back. I think COVID related, no other reason, but are still pending. The discipline that the city has given to the officers, independent of the officers' lawsuit against the city.
Oh, right. So I assume the question was about the publicized lawsuit. Is the question about that or both or just?
I wasn't sure, so I just wanted to add.
Okay, that's fair. Okay. Danny.
I think I might have seen Marty Kerr. Were you raising your hand?
Great, let me unmute them. Hold on one second. Marnie, you're unmuted. Did you have a question?
Yeah, I do. It sounds, listening to your descriptions, that excellent structures have been set up. People are very interested in it. But when it comes to actually getting the data or using the data to investigate discipline, that the FOP stops it, which seems to be happening all over the country. Is that where we are?
So Marty, are you referring to PAC work or to?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So thank you for your question. Let me say a couple of things. One is I don't know that I would describe where we are now as an excellent structure. I think that there's a lot of room to improve in terms of structure. And I think that City Council has seized on that, and I think that our administration supports that at this point, that there's a lot of room to be improved in terms of structure, powers, and composition. Thankfully, we do not have a lot of interaction with the FOP. The PAC, I mean, does not. So are there indirect pressures that might affect us? Certainly. But the PAC is not typically hampered by the FOP directly. Unfortunately, the folks that are the most difficult for us to get information from is the police department. Now, I think to your point, to many people's points, is the police department anticipating an objection from the FOP? That's absolutely possible. But no, our issues, and I'll use Plainview as an example, the Plainview project as an example, had very little to do with the FOP. The folks who were telling us that we could not receive information with the police department and their attorneys, and I shouldn't say could not, that were delaying our access to, were the police department and their attorneys. Does that answer your question, Marty?
Yeah, it does. I should have said police department probably, but at any rate.
No. I mean, and honestly, that's another issue, right? We should certainly, as residents of the city, be clear, or it should be made clear to us who the problematic actor is. Is it the FOP as the police union, which is supposed to be separate but often is considered the same as the police department, or is it the police department? So I don't fault you at all. I think often that line is blurred, and I think that needs to be clarified for all of us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Danny, were there any other questions in the queue?
Yes, somebody asked, I think there will be something with Act 111 that is trying to seek legislation on law enforcement, somebody mentioned. Darlene, would you want to be unmuted?
Where am I?
You're live.
Can you hear you?
Okay. Yes, I was just reading up on certain things. I think that was one of the issues of we have different laws or different things out there already, and it seems like everybody's trying to rewrite them instead of just amend what we already had. And my understanding of certain things and me trying to do a little investigating of how to get this, I guess everybody's just tired. Tired of, okay, you got to do baby steps, so at this point we already have something out there. Just pull it out and see what needs to be corrected on something that's already out there.
Yeah. Darlene, I thank you for mentioning kind of what all of us feel, right? That we should just fix this because it's so easy. And so many of us, sometimes I think it's easy to feel that way. What's important for me sometimes to remember is that it took us 60, 70 years, and took the FOP and other entities like them to build political capital and clout, to slowly change rules and laws, to slowly gain power, and bring us to a point in 2020 where policing was separate from most other professions, and given protections and power that most other unions and professions don't have, and that didn't happen overnight. It just happened quietly without a lot of people noticing, and frankly with the assistance of a lot of our political leaders. So, and I mentioned that only to say that I think and I hope it doesn't take as long to dismantle it, but that it's not a simple fix considering the odd mix of culture and deference and yes, policy and laws that come together to create a policing system like the one we have now. I think you're right. There's a lot of legislators who are looking to undo that, but it'll require the same attention again at the local level on policy and culture, at the state level, at certification of officers and the communication that needs to happen there, and again at the state and federal level as it relates to things like Act 111 and other state laws that cannot be controlled solely by a police chief or an oversight petitioner or a mayor. So I agree. Sometimes I wonder why this is so difficult because it seems so easy, and some of it is, frankly, especially for us in oversight. Some of the things that we know that we should get in terms of access that don't happen, make us feel like that every single day. But just to kind of quit my rambling a little bit, there are a lot of things that need to happen that are not easy and that will take real acts of legislation and real acts of political courage from our leaders at the state level, and I hope that they happen soon.
Okay then. So here, I guess, do we have anything that we could, I guess, locally, any kind of document or something that we have, locally that we can either look at and then based on that, say, like you said, it might be 10, but maybe 2 out of that we can start with?
Yeah, certainly. I think that, so you're doing the right thing right now by coming to a PAC meeting, right? So what we try and do here is talk about some of the things that we feel should occur. So, for instance, we're going to talk at some point about the Plainview project and our report about that, and recommendations that flow from that. We have on a regular basis talked about the PBI process and the disciplinary process that we feel is problematic. Not to blame any single person, but right. There is not, prior to the George Floyd protests, a lot of our work product hasn't been taken to City Council or to the mayor to say, the PAC was right about this, or we need to support this particular policy initiative of the Police Advisory Commission. So I guess this is my long way of plugging our work and suggesting that we, on a regular basis, and it's on our website now, make recommendations. Some of them we feel are sound and are not adopted, or some of them we feel should receive more support in the public sphere. And so there's a litany of things that we bring up that I would definitely encourage you to review, see if it makes sense to you. We're happy to talk about it offline and engage our elected officials to have deeper conversations, or our police commissioner to have deeper conversations about why the policies and the practices that we believe should change aren't changing. So that's one thing that we could all do tomorrow, is kind of pick up some of this work and see what we can do as residents. Okay,
yeah, thank you. Because that's the thing, I'm in the middle of getting hit with all this crime and the shooting.
Yeah.
I'm in the midst of it, and I seen that transition, and I see that, I think we talked about something like that before, like the police aren't babysitters. Mm-hmm. And here we're using them as, like a Band-Aid instead of actually them doing what they need to do. So as a resident, a homeowner and stuff, I'm seeing the transition of a lot of the homeowners are either old, they left or something like that, and the kids don't want their house. So we're dealing with a lot of tenants. So whoever the landlord is, they don't care. So that's part of the crime issue, as I see it, that policing an area where it's they don't have any, I guess, respect for where they're at.
Yeah, so Darlene, you know what? It sounds like you would be a good candidate to review our GVI report and tell us what you think of it and and try and find opportunities for you to support that report. Because that report does talk about the police's job as it relates to responding to crime, in particular violent crime. And what we try and do there is make sure that folks understand what harm can come of that if it's not done carefully. And it also, as you referenced, highlights the need for a non-police response to some of these activities, especially some of these downstream issues, or I should say upstream issues that relate to what causes crime. So check that out. Tell us what you think, and that might be a good place for you to start and get involved by paying attention to a program that is at its infancy in terms of GVI. They're really just starting to roll it out, and the police are like the rest of us are kind of building the plane as they fly it. I should be more fair. They planned it quite a bit, but they still need they're still working out the kinks. And I think hearing from residents as that happens will be a good place for you to get started. Thanks, Darlene.
Looks like Majib had his hand is up. Hey Majib, I think I've unmuted you.
Okay, I just want to share an incident a couple of years ago that there was a dispute between a auto repair shop and a police officer. And we both called them from the Police Advisory Commission. Me and now Judge Crumbridge, we both were together. We tried so hard to let a police officer come in and testify. 3 months we tried, and we were rejected all the way, and we couldn't do anything. If I understand now that with this new police oversight board, it can have more power and do those things in future, because FOP is strong. They send me a letter, and they say, you are a full-fledged organization, don't bother us. That is a letter which I got like 6-7 years ago from FOP. So hopefully in future, I hope they think in this election, we get the police oversight, and I hope we do have some peace, that we can bring the parties to a table so we can understand. I haven't seen anything that the FOP tried their best to hinder in every investigation which we have been through in the last 8 years, that we have come up to any conclusion, so we have to close the file. So I'm surprised that they have given only a budget of $400,000 for the police oversight board, which I have seen it in their new budget. Is that going to be enough to do all those things? A big question. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Mujib. I think you're right. I think that one of the things that folks need to recognize is that we can be granted powers, but the resources need to come with it. Otherwise, it'll be difficult to enact those powers.
Danny, had anybody else raised a question?
So Danny, you're muted, but you did send me in the chat. Can you use FOIA to get information from police when they refuse to give you info? So yeah, I think that is a possibility. If we got to a point that we were using FOIA to receive information from the police department, that would be a highly problematic way for the PAC to be communicating. We should be able to, by our executive order, receive information because of the powers granted to us in the executive order. So we should not have to go that route, and therefore we never have. Typically, we frame it as a request that we're entitled to by executive order, and continue down that path with the police department and their attorneys to get information. And we have certain other things in terms of powers granted to us under the Home Rule Charter that really highlight what we're entitled to in terms of as an agency. So we probably could use FOIA, but we never do. We typically operate through the executive order and the home rule charter.
I just sent you another question, Hans, in the chat.
Oh, interesting. Okay, so this is I don't know who asked this question, but this is the PAC doing any work on police conduct during COVID? There have been a few instances in which I've asked officers to put on their mask before entering a neighbor's home or coming close to me, to no avail. So much so that I had to file a formal complaint with Internal Affairs after an officer told me to F the mask and asked me if I was illiterate when I asked for their badge number and name. So no, we don't have any ongoing projects related to mask use in the PPD. You aren't the first person to reference this. I think you might be the first complaint that I've seen, and the staff can probably correct me if I'm wrong, that we've gotten complaints about that. Danny, have we gotten?
I've gotten several calls, not a lot. I mean, especially during the protests, there were a lot of people who would have called and gave complaints, mostly non-specific. They were just like, I saw this officer and they weren't wearing masks. Is there anything you're going to do about that? I do know Anthony and I have talked about it, and we've reached out to PPD to sort of find out what the policy is, to understand better to what level people are breaking that, because I don't know if it's, aside from wearing masks when you're inside, I don't know what the current laws are in Pennsylvania.
Right. So understanding if the police have a directive on whether or not they should wear masks, and in what situations, for sure, and if police officers are violating that. We can, well, both the good news and the bad news is that I don't believe that we will be out of a mask wearing mandate if should one exist by next meeting. So we can certainly follow up with the PPD again to understand what they are doing to ensure mask usage, especially when officers are around people. This is at its basis level is an officer safety issue. So we can certainly contact them, express that we've gotten a complaint from, I'm sure Danny knows who it is, but we can keep it confidential, and ask them to tell us what they're doing and perhaps send out additional guidance to officers. So no promises that they'll do that. We can make that recommendation, at least informally. So stay tuned, and we'll put it on our agenda for next month to see where we are on that.
Great. I think those are all the questions I currently have.
Well, and that brings us basically to the end of our agenda. We've gone through this in record time. So unless anyone else from the staff or any of the other commissioners have anything to say, I think we can just thank everyone for coming. Our next meeting.
Ben, we actually have a presentation on mediation that we're going to get to.
Oh, okay. Sorry, I didn't see that on my agenda, so I definitely don't want to skip that, and I apologize. And let's go to that.
It was near the top, but I think Hans passed it to come back to it.
Yeah, it's always, when in doubt, just blame me, Ben. That's what everyone else does. So
that's what I do, yeah.
Yeah, but I will make it brief as I can be. You guys have heard me speak before. So Danny, if you can, I'll just jump into that. Thanks. All right, so this is our police community mediation program. I'll go through this in about 10 minutes, I hope.
Great.
So about a little over a year ago, the PAC delivered a report to the police department regarding a mediation program. Now, we did that in 3 phases. Part 1 was a delivered written report. Part 2 was a prototype and mediation session where Anthony Arachi from the PAC, an officer from Temple, and Randy Duque from the PCHR, the Philadelphia Commission on Human Relations, actually played out a mediation session with a script that we wrote about a police interaction that had went awry, and showed police leadership in the police department and some members of the managing director's office what a mediation would look like. That was our prototype, to really get them to see what it would look like. And part 3 was when we sat down with the PPD and we discussed what a mediation program could look like if we implemented it, and what would be necessary on both of our ends. So that whole process took somewhere about around a year. There was some significant delays because of the flux in police department leadership. Danny, next slide. Thanks. So just for those of you who are here, mediation is a voluntary and confidential process where parties come together to resolve an issue. In this case, that would mean that a police officer and a resident would both agree to mediation after a complaint was filed and would agree to talk through what had occurred and communicate around it. The mediator opens the communication between the parties and keeps the conversation focused, productive, and free from offensive or abusive language. There's approximately 29 police departments and/or oversight agencies that offer police community mediation right now as an option to resolve complaints. We want to be number 30. So they're confidential. Both parties are required to sign a confidentiality agreement. Only people present are the officer and the resident. And what this means is that folks are encouraged and now permitted to speak candidly about what has occurred without fear that this might be used in a lawsuit or otherwise used against them in another proceeding, like a criminal proceeding. Mediators are third-party people, so they are, as we mentioned already, meant to stay neutral. They're not fact finders, they're not investigators, they're not judges, and they don't take sides. The current system for a complaint doesn't allow for any of this, right? So for those of you who are here who filed a complaint, what effectively occurs is that you file a complaint, that complaint is investigated, and at some point you either get a letter telling you the findings, and in some rarer cases are asked to come to a hearing to be a witness. You're not ever given the opportunity to discuss what has occurred with the person that you feel has harmed you. And it can take sometimes a year, sometimes 6 months to a year to get that issue resolved. And at the end of it, almost no one's satisfied. Residents are unsatisfied, the police are not satisfied. And as a result, what we have is two parties or two groups of people that become further entrenched in their views, and nothing is resolved to improve that relationship. So because mediation is voluntary, the reason it's voluntary is because we want to increase mutual understanding of the parties, and it wouldn't be effective to force people to attend if that was the goal. It's non-punitive for the same reasons, because what we want is for folks to come to a resolution and not for one person to be determined to be right or wrong. So the goals of community police mediation. It's a traditional investigative methods are grounded in fact-finding, right? Whereas mediation complaints against police aim to increase understanding on both sides. Complaint investigation does little to resolve issues rooted in poor communication or misunderstanding, and at times only serve to increase the divide between the citizen and the officer, leaving both sides feeling unfairly targeted. Mediation allows both parties the opportunity to consider opposing perspectives, and community police mediation can improve legitimacy because it improves procedural justice. So what that last point effectively means is that the process itself can often be offensive to folks. Again, the timing that goes into it and the lack of transparency in that. So the fact that this is something that people are able to participate in, able to understand why it's occurring and how it's occurring, is procedurally seen as more just, and therefore can increase the legitimacy of the police. And legitimacy is just a fancy word that helps us say that we believe the police are entitled to our compliance and entitled to do their job the way that they want to do it. That's effectively what legitimacy is. So here's some benefits of the complaint mediation. It's early in the process. It's more efficient. So and therefore resolved in much more timely manner. It offers a resolution for complaints of discourtesy, professionalism, or lack of service. Often these are the complaints that are unfounded or not sustained, because They are highly nuanced and really occur in that moment where officers and residents are forming their relationship, their brief relationship, and their brief interaction that is not often seen by other people and not often documented by other people. So these complaints in particular can be resolved in mediation in a much better way than they will be resolved in by an investigation because of the nature of the complaints. We meet the needs of some complainants better than other investigations because some complainants, this is what they want. They're not necessarily interested in a punitive response. They want to have a communication with the person that they feel wronged them and want to, in many cases, these are religious people that want to communicate with folks along those lines. They want to make people understand how they felt, and they don't see any benefit to someone just being punished without their input or involvement. And increases transparency and alleviates confusion and frustration during the investigation process. Residents who contact us are regularly frustrated about the radio silence. They don't know what's going on. It's been 90 days, it's been 100 days, and they're frustrated about the fact that they feel that their case is a simple investigation and it shouldn't take so long, and they don't know what is happening. So that frustration is really problematic for them, and this resolves that in many ways. So the benefits of participating in complaint mediation. Citizens are empowered by police, actively listening and responding to perspective. They coming together and to listen and problem solve build social capital that extends beyond individuals. Becoming an active part of the process and having issues addressed promptly for residents, and increased knowledge of policing, policy, and procedure, as well as the officer's thought process and decision making. This one is one of the ones that we feel the police department was really interested in because it effectively lends itself to the idea that many police officers have, which is that they do things in certain ways that are misunderstood and do things based on policy and procedure that keep everyone safe that are often misunderstood, and that those things can be highlighted in mediation to help people understand that they did not mean to be offensive or did not mean to communicate in a way that was deemed to be harsh, but that because but this is what their training leads them to do, and this is what it helps them keep everyone safe. And finally, it allows folks to share their thoughts on policing and really give input, which I think we're all here for these meetings, right? To tell police how we want to be policed. And this process allows for that, where you can tell a police officer, this is what I prefer as you communicate in my community moving forward. So what happens during a mediation session? There's an opening statement where the mediator will speak to both parties and explain the process. There's uninterrupted time where the resident and the officer are both given time to share their perspective on what has occurred, on what the dispute is. And the mediator during that time gathers information to understand more of each person's point of view. Go ahead, Danny. So there's also a caucus. If at any point there's an aspect of the mediation that a resident or officer feels they want to discuss privately, they can request a caucus, which is basically a time where the mediator and the person requesting the caucus have a private, confidential meeting where they can ask questions, they can state a problem that they're having, and then that information can be held in confidence, and they can return back to the mediation session with the other person without that information being shared with that person. It's kind of an opportunity for them to discuss the issues alone with the mediator. And so finally, a conclusion. This is what we're looking for, right? Ultimately, this is the idea where the resident and the officer can come together and try and understand how they move forward. It doesn't require an apology, doesn't require an admission of guilt. It doesn't even require an agreement. It just requires the two folks that had a conflict understand how they can move forward, and even if that just means that they heard each other out and that they agree to disagree, that would be a successful resolution to this type of process. So that is our program for mediation. We're excited about this. It may seem like a fairly simple project. It did take over a year to effectively research, present, and get agreement on, and we're hoping to start this fall. I'm happy to take any questions about mediation, but I will mention before we take any questions that although I presented this was work done by Anastasia McCarthy, who is not here this evening, who worked extraordinarily hard on this project and really delivered what is going to be a great program that's going to change the landscape of complaints in the city. So she's not here, she could not make it. Just wanted to thank her and acknowledge her hard work and dedication to this project. Are there any questions?
I did send you one in the chat already, Hans.
Thank you. I see that now. So the question is, are these processes used for serious complaints when an officer is accused of wrongdoing? So I don't know what we would call a serious complaint, but to answer the question, yes, there are categories of complaints that are eligible and those that are not eligible for mediation. So a serious, for instance, use of force or discharge of a firearm or any real use of force is likely not going to be eligible for mediation. So the police department and the PAC need to agree on that, and the resident need to agree on whether or not a case is suitable for mediation, and the residents of the city and the officer need to agree that a case is suitable for mediation. There are some that just aren't going to be suitable, and some of those, as you point out rightfully, are going to be some of the more serious ones, but there are categories that we're focusing on.
Looks like Michael has his hand. I'm gonna.
Great, Hans. Thank you for covering all of that, and I apologize if you did cover this because if so I missed it. Mediation, in at least in my knowledge of mediation, it's often a result of really positive trust between police and the community rather than a cause. It's definitely both, but if you're starting in an era or in a city where we believe that trust starts off relatively weak, it's a challenge to get that off the ground, to get people to buy in, even if it seems low stakes, for want of a better phrase. So my question is, if you have plans to help promote or encourage or otherwise advocate for, say, test cases that might indicate whether or not, how you might strategically promote this more going forward. Thanks.
Yeah. So I'll say that I think you're correct that if you don't already have some investment or trust in the police department, you probably aren't interested in this. There are many folks though who that have contacted the PAC that express a lot of sympathy for police officers. They'll say things like, "I understand they have a hard job, and I understand that they're probably having a bad day." And so there's a lot of deference and a lot of ideas that come out of the complaint process where folks are kind of already trying to make sense of this by infusing some other logic, like I said, a bad day, a difficult job, etc. So those folks are the folks that are probably the most interested in mediation. They understand the humanity of police officers and want to dig deep into why they feel someone treated them poorly. So certainly in a macro sense, the trust in the police by residents of this city, or really any city at this point, has dipped quite a bit. But in the micro sense, on an individual basis, we're looking for the folks that still have a lot of faith and still want to engage police officers on that. But to answer your question more directly, as it relates to recruitment, this again will be kind of a one-to-one referral system where folks contact the PAC for a complaint and are explained that there's another option should they be interested in it. And if they are, we will assess that on the PPD's end and on our end to determine if that will move forward as a mediation case. We are not yet at a point where we'll be saying, come to the PAC mediation program when you have a police officer you want to mediate with. It'll likely originate, as any other complaint against police would originate, with an offer for a different type of resolution should someone be interested in it. I don't know if does that answer your question, Michael? You're muted, so I'm just gonna hope it's yes. I don't know. I can't.
Yes,
Go ahead, go
yes.
ahead.
I tried to, Danny's got it
Where
firmly
will the
locked down.
where will the mediators be selected from? And will they be volunteers or will they be paid staff?
Oh, baby, I haven't told you, but you're the one mediator we're using. I'm kidding. No, the Randy Duque, I believe, is on the call. We can unmute Randy if he wants to say anything. But the pilot phase for sure, the PCHR is going to partner with us on, and there are a lot of different conversations about where the next mediators will come from after the pilot phase. There is actually, believe it or not, a large cadre of mediators trained in the city. The question is, and when I say large, I mean a very large cadre of mediators that don't have a lot of mediating to do. So we want to tap into that resource, but until we build that out, Randy and folks in PCHR will be leading the charge on that. Randy, what do you think?
Yeah, so yeah, as a pilot, I'll be doing the mediations just to get it off the ground. And then, as Hans mentioned, there are quite a few pools from the Association for Conflict Resolution's local chapter, which I'm a board member on. We have mediators there, as well as a Good Shepherd mediation program that trains mediators all the time. So they have a large cadre themselves of people that can pick from. So as we see, as a program progresses, then we can sort of reassess and see how these neutrals would be chosen and recruited.
That sounds great.
Thank you, Randy. Thank
You're
you.
welcome.
Do you have any other questions? I don't see anything else in the chat.
Okay. Well then, maybe what I said earlier is now operative. And I think we've made it through our agenda. And so unless any other comments from staff, from commissioners, I think we can just thank everyone for your participation tonight. We will reconvene on Monday, September 21st at 6 p.m. Also on Zoom. And I hope we'll see everyone again at that meeting. And I believe we can adjourn.
Great. Do we need a motion?
I don't think we do, but we always do one anyway, so let's do one. Motion to adjourn.
I have Majib, I think. Motion.
All right, is there a second?
George.
All in favor? All opposed? We're adjourned. All right, thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Everyone.